Now, a lot of kids growing up had an Atari 2600, they had a Nintendo, maybe they even had a Sega Genesis, but not everybody had a ColecoVision. If you did, I salute you. You are a true video game fan.
You didn't see too many ColecoVisions. You had like one friend who had one. But still, everyone knows what a Coleco is.
Like all the important video game consoles, the ColecoVision started in Hartford, Connecticut with a leather company.
Coleco stands for Connecticut Leather Company. Coleco. That's where the name came from.
They started out as a leather company. In the 50s, they start making above-ground pools. In the 60s, that kind of turns into a business where they're making foosball tables, tabletop hockey games. And then in the 70s, finally, they start developing video games.
Back in '76, they started the Telstar line. And this was a line of basic boxes you'd hook up to your TV, and they each played one game. They had like a shooting game, they had a Pong knockoff. But then Atari came out with a system where you could use interchangeable cartridges. A brilliant idea. You could play different games on the same box, and that was it. The Telstar was buried.
After Atari comes in and just captures the entire home market, Coleco says what's left, and they start developing some of the first handheld video games. The most famous of which was Electronic Quarterback.
They also made the solid-state little mini arcade games that people loved.
And they had, you know, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Space Invaders.
Which are great for, taking home, and they're full-size arcade machines if you have any tiny people around.
But Coleco was waiting, trying to figure out its next move to get back into the home market in a big way.
What nobody realizes about Atari's technology, because there's not that much competition in the video game space, is that it's getting a little old. And Coleco comes in with this brand new system. It's 5 years later technology-wise, which is an enormous amount of time. It's an entire generation of video game consoles. It's the difference between a Super Nintendo and a PlayStation.
Even though the Atari 2600 is 5 years old at the time, it doesn't really matter because Atari has so many games and so much money.
Atari is the 800-pound gorilla of the video game industry. Any good arcade game that comes along, Atari locks up the rights and puts out the home version. So where's Coleco gonna find an in?
They're gonna scour the arcades and find the cult classics that Atari missed. These great games that Atari just never picked up, like Zaxxon, Mr. Do.
The other thing they did, which is crazy, they created an adapter that you could actually play Atari games on the ColecoVision.
Never been done before, never been done since. If you tried to pitch an idea like this today, your lawyer's head would just explode.
The last piece of their plan to launch this in a big way, they needed to have a secret weapon, and Coleco's secret weapon was Donkey Kong.
In 1981, Donkey Kong is the second biggest arcade game in the world. Pac-Man's #1. And Donkey Kong was made by this real small Japanese company that no one had heard of at the time, called Nintendo.
Nintendo wanted to get a home version of Donkey Kong into living rooms across America, and they said, we're a small guy, let's partner with another small guy, like Coleco, and maybe we can help each other out and kind of take a little bit of the wind out of Atari sales.
The two small companies at the dance, they see each other from across the room, they lock eyes, and the rest is history.
So in July of '82, ColecoVision comes out with Donkey Kong, and it happens to be a really great translation of the arcade game.
And now bear in mind, this is only 2 months after Pac-Man came out for the Atari 2600, and that was a complete debacle. It was completely terrible, so in one step, they're already making the head guy look bad.
Donkey Kong, for all intents and purposes, was the Mario of ColecoVision. The only problem is it was about to throw a barrel at them, and they didn't know it, and they were nowhere near the hammer.
Very close to when they were about to launch, they got a not-so-nice call/letter from Universal Studios, and it was the equivalent of a cease and desist.
We're on the eve of the launch of the ColecoVision. It's about to come out, and Sid Sheinberg, the head of Universal, hears about it and says, hey, Donkey Kong, King Kong, Gorilla, that's kind of similar. I could probably make money on this.
He goes after both Nintendo and Coleco and he says, look, you have 48 hours to provide me with all of the receipts from all of your sales of Donkey Kong related material. And you have to destroy all your inventory and any kind of Donkey Kong related merchandising that you have. And if you don't, we're gonna sue you.
Coleco, they were a company that had been around for a long time, but they weren't a huge company. They immediately buckled.
But Nintendo, Donkey Kong is just this huge hit for them. It's this huge hit. And they're not willing to settle as easily.
And through a little digging, Howard Lincoln, the Nintendo of America, found that only a few years earlier, Universal had brought a lawsuit that actually disproved their claim to the copyright.
In 1975, which is just 7 years earlier, Universal Studios does a remake of King Kong, starring Jeff Bridges of the movie Tron fame and Jessica Lange.
To bring that film to market, they actually had to prove that the rights to King Kong had elapsed and it had become public domain.
So basically, Universal Studios, 7 years ago, is in court proving that King Kong is public domain and nobody owns the rights to it. Now they're doing a complete 180.
Universal kind of gets caught in their own lie, and they're forced to pay Nintendo $1.8 million for frivolous lawsuits, just for wasting the American legal system's time, Nintendo's time, your time. You've had to hear about the story now.
And all Universal Studios was trying to do was scare these two little companies into giving them free money. And it backfired.
Universal flat out abused the legal system. They flat out abused it. Much like Donkey Kong would abuse Mario.
So thanks to Nintendo, Colecovision comes out with a DK cartridge, it ships with the Colecovision, and now the Colecovision is on its way. And Donkey Kong wasn't the only great game that was going to come out on Coleco. There was Montezuma's Revenge, Miner 2049er,
Games like Gateway to Abshai, the first home RPG.
Rocky, Popeye, Pit Stop. I mean, the list goes on and on.
But unfortunately, they got into the business at exactly the wrong time. 1982 was cool, 1983, that's when the whole home gaming business fell apart.
And the big video game crash happened and swept Coleco, Atari, and everyone else off the map.
It looked like Coleco was going to be the next big thing. Just kind of bad timing.
So after the big video game crash of '83, the public has moved on to personal computers. They don't want anything to do with video games anymore. So Coleco responds with two products. One is a huge success, and the other is a huge failure.
Trying to compete with the influx of personal computers and this interest in that, they came out with the Atom.
Unfortunately, they were really rushing to get it out the door, and about half the units didn't work.
If you have half of your product returned as defective, your name is soiled. You're never gonna recover from that. So that's what happened.
The other product was a huge success, something a little low-tech, but the Cabbage Patch doll.
The fact that they come up with Cabbage Patch Kids is great. It's a huge success for them. But the problem with having a huge success as a toy is that it's only hot for 1 year. After that Christmas season, people move on.
You know, the next year it's replaced by Teddy Ruxpin. In 1986, Teddy Ruxpin's replaced by Laser Tag. The year after that, Laser Tag's replaced by Nintendo.
So we've come full circle. Video games at the top, to the huge crash, to being on top again. But this time, Coleco's nowhere to be found.
By 1988, Coleco had filed for bankruptcy, and so ends the great legacy of the Connecticut Leather Company.
It was fun while it lasted. Sorry you had to go.